You guys see that? Excellent. So today we're talking about the changing oceans. This will be our one lesson. Like I said, that video I sent you yesterday, and our one lesson on Earth's changing oceans before we move on to space when we get back from our break. Good. So we're going to talk about human impact on the oceans, the changes we're observing in our oceans, and some ways that human beings can help protect Earth's oceans. Earth's oceans, over the course of our planet's pretty long history, our oceans have changed kind of significantly. During the last ice age, we mentioned that during climate, how Earth has gone through this period of like colder ice ages and then these interglacial intervals where global temperatures have fluctuated by a couple degrees. During the last ice age, oceans were much colder and they covered a lot less of the continental shelves, which are those kind of like the part of land that's underwater. Earlier, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, much of the continental lands were covered by these shallow, salty seas. So a lot of the land that we see today might have been under some kind of salt water during the age of the dinosaurs. And so there's been a lot of natural fluctuation in the way the oceans look and stuff like that. And they continue to change today, but for different reasons. A lot of the changes that are happening in our oceans today are less natural and are more due to human actions, for better or for worse. Human actions like things like overfishing and polluting have an overall net negative impact on oceans and ocean resources around the world. So first, we'll talk about overfishing. For thousands of years, right? For most of human history, humans have relied on the ocean for food. Fishing is one of the first things. It's relatively easy to get healthy protein by fishing. However, recently, overfishing has become a pretty major issue. It's causing the populations of a lot of marine species to decline, which is problematic. Overfishing is when too many fish or other marine animals are harvested for human consumption. And that decreases the populations of those species. When we catch too many fish, there are not enough fish. And then those fish cannot repopulate, and that becomes an issue. During the past 50 years, overfishing has decreased the populations of things like cod, haddock, flounder by as much as 95%. So these populations are extremely limited and much smaller than they were even just 50 years ago. And you'll notice cod, haddock, flounder, these are probably the fish that you would order at a restaurant or eat at a store. Some of the fish that you would eat that are pretty common. Crustacean populations, crabs, lobsters have also declined, again, due to overfishing. We just harvest too many of these things. Here's a picture of a trawl fishing boat. They trawl this giant net behind the boat and just scoop up entire schools of fish. And I'm not going to make the argument that fishing is a bad thing, right? There are a lot of humans on this planet, and humans need to eat, and fishing is one way that they can do that. But overfishing and things like catching fish that are too small for humans to really eat, but then fish that are so small that they haven't had a chance to reproduce and repopulate the species yet is a pretty major issue. So if people stopped fishing in the oceans, obviously struggling species would probably recover. So just a flat out cold turkey, no more fishing, means the oceans would kind of go back to normal. However, that's not really a feasible solution because so many people around the world rely on fish and seafood as part of their diet. And many people make their living by fishing. So the problems caused by overfishing, it's not as simple as just saying, hey, well, we should then stop fishing so much, because that would cause other problems. So some of the solutions that people pose are limits on the number of fish that certain fishers can catch, limits on the size of the fish, right? Catching only large fish and not small ones, because the small ones haven't had a chance to reproduce yet. And these are some of the steps that are being taken. Instituting seasons for fishing, like you're only allowed to fish for certain months of the year, and then giving fish an opportunity to kind of repopulate their species is another possible solution. And these are things that that the government is doing to try and help this problem. Coral reefs. We didn't get a chance to really talk about coral reefs. I think you saw maybe a little bit about coral reefs in the video. They thrive in clear, warm waters that are in the sublittoral zone. It's like the shallow ocean. You see like barrier reefs off the coast of Australia. If you've ever been to the Florida Keys, there's coral reefs down there. They thrive in those relatively shallow salt waters. And a coral reef is home to just a massive variety of fish and ocean animal species. Anemones, mollusks, fish, all kinds of other ocean animals. The coral reef, you ever seen the movie Finding Nemo? The coral reef is where they lived, and that's great diversity of fish and ocean animal species that lived there. People depend on reef ecosystems for food, especially in developing countries. Fishing off the coasts in the coral reefs provides food for a lot of people. Here's a picture of a coral reef. I know I joke about this all the time. I actually did take this picture. This is off the Florida Keys when I went scuba diving. Reefs around the world, however, are suffering. They are being depleted. Coral bleaching is the whitening of coral colonies due to the death of the algae that live within healthy corals. The coral itself, that structure, is almost like a skeleton. It's almost like cartilage from these tiny animals that kind of build this structure up. And when that algae, when those tiny creatures are killed, the coral turns from that very rich, pretty colorful, kind of vibrant color into just a kind of like a sickly white looking color. And without the algae, the coral colony starts to die. It starts to starve to death. Here is a bleached coral ecosystem, and you're noticing the difference here, right? Like, it's not just the fact that it is white in appearance. It's the fact that this coral ecosystem has no animals living in it. I mean, you're seeing a school of fish passing by overhead, but there's no animals living in this ecosystem. Unlike this one, where there's all kinds of life that depends on this coral ecosystem for survival. And so coral bleaching is a problem because it destroys those communities of ocean animals. Scientists suggest that coral bleaching involves the quality of ocean water. When water temperature rises, or pollution, or even the changes in the pH level, which is how acidic the water is. Things like even silt from coastal runoff can cause coral bleaching. We're not entirely sure, and it's probably a combination of all those factors. Bleached coral can recover if conditions are corrected quickly. However, if the whole ecosystem dies, then that's it. It can't recover if those tiny algae and those little polyps die. Then the ecosystem is lost. We're talking about runoff. This is runoff, right? Dumping polluted water that is too hot, even water that is infected with silt or other kind of like dirt that's not natural to the ecosystem. All of those things can contribute to coral bleaching. Dead zones. For many years, people have harvested fish, shrimp, crabs, all kinds of shellfish off the coasts of Oregon and Washington State, West Coast, up in the north above California. However, every summer from 2001, starting in 2001, even to today, observers have noticed that a huge number of marine organisms have died within a particular region of ocean water in this area. We call those regions dead zones. And a dead zone forms when the oxygen levels in the water are so low that the water cannot support life. Here's a map of some of the dead zones around the world, and you're seeing that pretty much all these dead zones are off the coasts of industrialized nations that do a lot of fishing, a lot of shipping, a lot of boating, things like that. And the number of dead zones has been increasing since the 70s. They threaten fish populations. They threaten the human populations that depend on the fish. One of the world's largest dead zones is in the Gulf of Mexico, which is kind of like tucked between Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, not in that order. Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas. That area has one of the largest dead zones in the world. And that's because the Mississippi River, that kind of runs through the entire, most of the center of the United States. That entire river and all its, all the little streams that flow into it, all its little subsidiaries, all pour into the Gulf of Mexico, right through Louisiana, and all the fertilizer, all the pollution, everything that ends up in the Mississippi River, ends up in the Gulf of Mexico eventually, and dead zones in that way are caused by pollution that oftentimes begins on land. So the stuff that we do on land affects the stuff that happens in the water in that way. Common sources of pollution include sewage from cities, fertilizers, pollution from cars, and stuff like that. Anything that ends up in the water on land usually ends up in the ocean at some point. It's getting to be springtime. Some of you probably have a nice front lawn, nice back lawn. You might have someone come and take care of it for you. Maybe your parents do it themselves. But oftentimes you'll fertilize your lawn. You'll put down some kind of like Miracle-Gro or something to help your lawn look nice and green and healthy. Putting down too much of that can end up in the storm drains, and the storm drains dump right into the ocean. And so that kind of pollution, even if we don't think of it as pollution, we think of it as a helpful thing like fertilizer helping our plants grow, but too much of it can run off into the oceans and cause problems. Here's the dead zone, again, right off the coast of Louisiana, because the Mississippi River is just dumping all the fertilizer and pollution and stuff like that straight into that area. There are pretty much no living ocean organisms in this entire region. Advancing ocean waters, we've talked about this a little bit, but a little case study. For 4,000 years, this little town in Alaska called Shishmaref. It was a barrier island off the north coast of Alaska. And in 2004, the residents had to abandon the town because during stormy weather, the advancing ocean was just eroding away the foundations of their buildings and damaging their city's water system. And so the residents packed up and moved out of that town, and that is now an abandoned town. Here's a picture from Shishmaref of I think this is a warehouse of some kind, but that the ground under it was so eroded, the ground under it was so washed away by the ocean during storms that the entire building just kind of collapsed over itself. Many scientists believe that global warming is the cause of advancing ocean waters, right? Rising sea levels, higher temperatures that have been reducing the amount of sea ice that normally covers the Arctic. Open waters allow more powerful waves and storm surges to reach the shoreline, and warmer weather has been reducing the layer of permafrost along the coastline, which allows for easier erosion. Here's another view from Shishmaref. Again, you can see they've built these levees in part of the town over here to help protect. They were trying to stave off that, but this levee, this protective barrier was broken, and you can see how quickly a major storm can erode the foundations of buildings. And this is not an unfamiliar sight. This is kind of what part of the southern coast of Long Island looked like. This is what part of Long Beach looked like after Hurricane Sandy, with that kind of eroding of the coastline. And so, what can we do to reverse the trend? What can we do to protect our oceans? Although we've harmed them, we're now working to protect them. The U.S. government runs the NOAA, called NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And NOAA's mission is to understand and to predict the changes that are happening in our environment, in our atmosphere, and in our ocean, and to manage those resources in a sustainable and wise way. So NOAA helps use government grants to pay for research on ocean issues, and they publish that information and distribute it worldwide. So the things that we discover about what we can do to stop the harmful effects on our oceans, we then share that with the rest of the world. This is the symbol for NOAA. You might see this symbol on, I'm sure you saw, I think the video we watched yesterday was probably produced by NOAA. You've probably seen this symbol around before. Ocean pollution is a serious issue. Yet many scientists agree that global warming is the most serious problem currently facing the oceans, right? Pollution is bad. Global warming is truly, truly a scary thing when it comes to our oceans. Most of the harmful impacts on Earth's oceans were caused, at least in part by, or exacerbated by, the gradual increase in ocean temperatures we've been observing for the past 30, 40 years. And if ocean waters were to warm significantly, that would bleach so much of our coral ecosystem. Other marine life would suffer. And if sea levels rose worldwide, as they are doing, even more communities would be would go the way of Shishmaref and kind of be forced to relocate to higher ground because of rising sea levels. And most seriously, ocean currents could be affected. Ocean currents, we did not talk about them at all, but I would have given you a lesson on ocean currents, and you would hopefully have remembered that deep water currents form because of temperature and salinity differences in ocean waters. Kind of like Earth's winds are caused by differences in pressure that are caused by differences in temperature. It's similar with our currents. Ocean currents are movements of water that are caused by differences in temperature. And if temperatures were to change enough, those currents could change themselves. Those currents could change direction, location. We believe that in some cases this has already begun. We've talked about El Nino before, that warm water current pushing off the coast of Argentina heading towards Australia. And that is what some people will cite as evidence of global currents changing because of the gradual rise in temperatures, because of climate change. Changes in ocean currents could seriously affect Earth's climate. They could affect our long-term weather patterns, and that would be scary, having more El Nino type unpredictable weather phenomena because of global warming. Wonderful. Are there any questions? I've talked quite a bit, but you guys have any questions about the challenges facing Earth's oceans and what some of the potential solutions are?
Mr. Shefflin.
Who's talking right now? Yeah, I can't.
Jasmine.
Jasmine, what's up, Jasmine?
Yeah. Robbie is wanted me to tell you that he's not in the call.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair enough. What can I do about that?
He's in the waiting room.
Oh. How do I see the waiting room? Maybe I can't do that while I'm sharing my screen. Oh, look at that. Robbie and Jordan showing up right at the end. Well done. What's going on, Jordan? I don't think that's Jordan. That's not Jordan. And Robbie, good. I'm glad you guys got here right at the end. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I would just ask, when we do live sessions in the future, do your best to be here on time. I get it. This is the first one we've done. I'm not blaming anybody or anything like that. Please try and get here on time, because once I switch screens, I can't see the waiting room anymore, so I can't admit you guys. Great. That is all I have for you. I'm not giving you guys work over break to do. I think I've given you guys quite enough work to do. So enjoy your break. Are there any questions before we close for the day? Perfect. All right then, guys, have a wonderful break. Have a blessed Easter, and I will see you all when we get back. Stay safe and take care, guys. Have a good one.